Howdy folks, it's me, Josh. In the lead up to World War I, European powers were scrambling to find alliances among each other in order to make sure that they were secure from other powers who wanted to rip them to shreds. And this would end up leading to the formation of the Central Powers in the Entente, with Germany forced to fight a war on two fronts against France in the west and Russia in the east. But before they became enemies, there was a time in which Germany, Russia, and Austria-Hungary were close allies in what was known as the League of the Three Emperors. But this alliance wouldn't last. So what if that changed? What if, in an alternate timeline, the League of the Three Emperors survived? So first, what even was the League of the Three Emperors? Why did it even exist? And more importantly, why did it fail? To answer all three of these questions, we're going to need to go back to the mid-19th century. The year is 1871, and the Kingdom of Prussia, under the leadership of Otto von Bismarck, defeated France in the Franco-Prussian War, allowing them to unite the numerous German states into one German Empire. And this would end up turning the delicate balance of power in Europe on its head, as the once weak, disunited German states ended up turning into one of the most powerful empires on the continent. And with France pissed at Germany for not only taking Alsace-Lorraine, but also their position as the dominant land power in Europe, Bismarck would decide to make alliances. He reasoned that, since Germany was surrounded by other great powers on all sides, if France were to ally with even just one of them, this would put Germany in an extremely dangerous position. So naturally, he began pushing for close relations with Austria-Hungary and Russia in order to counteract this and isolate France on the continent. Bismarck came up with the idea of the League of the Three Emperors as a revival of a previous alliance that had already existed between these three empires, known as the Holy Alliance, which was meant to preserve the traditional monarchical rule in Eastern Europe and stop the spread of liberalism. And once again seeking to do this, and seeing the potential that an alliance between these three great powers would have, both Austria and Russia would sign on, joining the League. However, putting the League together was the easy part. The hard part was keeping it together. And the reason for that is the Balkans. Throughout the 19th century, nationalism had risen among numerous different groups, including the Slavs. And so, seeing themselves as one united people, the ideas of pan-Slavism began to come about, seeking unity between all Slavic peoples. However, one group of Slavs, the South Slavs, were under the rule of both the Austrian and Ottoman empires, and fueled by this nationalism, began to push back against their rule in hopes of establishing a united South Slav, or Yugoslav, state. And since there were a ton of South Slavs within Austria's borders, this began to freak them out. But you know who else is a Slavic state? Russia. Russia had long held an interest in expanding towards the Mediterranean Sea as a way to gain warm water ports and greater access to global trade. Now, back in the 1850s, Russia had attempted to expand to the Mediterranean, but several Western powers decided to gang up on them, defeating Russia in the Crimean War, a major defeat for Russia, which stunted their ability to expand southward. But they weren't ready to give up. Numerous people in Russia began coming up with ideas on how to make Russia great again and find ways to undo the effects of the Crimean War and make it to the Mediterranean. And there were two main approaches. First, there was the diplomatic approach, which said that Russia ought to form diplomatic alliances with other powers, giving them the strength to achieve their goals and keep such a coalition from ganging up on them again. But the second approach was the pan-Slavic nationalist approach. This approach, using Russia's position as a Slavic great power, would see them ride the wave of Yugoslav nationalism in the Balkans, spurring on revolutions and expanding their influence. However, since there were all those South Slavs in Austria, supporting Yugoslav nationalism would also mean supporting revolutions against the Austrians. Now, at first, Russia decided to go with the diplomatic approach, entering into the League of the Three Emperors with Austria and Germany in 1873. But just a couple years later, this would all change. In 1875, due to high taxes and persecution, Herzegovina would revolt against Ottoman rule. And seeing an opportunity, numerous others, most notably Serbia and Bulgaria, would join the fight. Serbia was strongly in favor of Yugoslavism and tried to unite with Bosnia in an attempt to create a Yugoslav state. But this freaked the Austrians out, as they feared that, if they succeeded, it could give South Slavs within their empire a jumping-off point for revolution. So the Emperor of Austria, Franz Joseph, would have a meeting with the Russian Foreign Minister, Alexander Gorchakov, in which Gorchakov had a brilliant idea. Why don't we just split the Balkans? You take the West, we take the East, and no South Slavic state threatens you. Yeah, sure, that works. With Austria not afraid anymore, Russia decided that they were going to get involved in the war, starting what was known as the Russo-Turkish War of 1876, in order to support Bulgaria, who was within their sphere of influence. And so, with their differences resolved, Austria and Russia would never compete over the Balkans again. Oh wait, some pan-Slavists just hijacked the peace deal between Russia and the Turks and tried to create a pan-Yugoslav mega-Bulgaria. Welp. Austria, naturally, was pissed about being betrayed by Russia, and shortly after, they, alongside Germany and a few other countries, decided to call the Congress of Berlin. No, not that one, that one. And during the Congress, they decided that Mega Bulgaria was a no-no, but Austria got to occupy Bosnia. After this, Russia felt cheated by Austria and Germany and began to feel that they couldn't rely on them to further their goals, as the League of the Three Emperors would fall through. And though Bismarck, desperately trying to keep Russia in the fold, would revive the League numerous times, the tension and distrust between Austria and Russia would prove too great, as it would once again collapse each time he tried. And in 1890, Wilhelm II became Emperor of Germany, dismissing Bismarck. And with him, the potential of alliance with Russia left too, as Russia would instead befriend France, as Germany would end up surrounded, and, after the outbreak of the First World War, face a disastrous two-front war. But what if that changed? What if, in an alternate timeline, the League of the Three Emperors had survived? Now, first, how the heck can this even happen? So the only way that this can really happen is if Russia doesn't push for Pan-Slavism. Now, Russia had numerous reasons for pushing for Pan-Slavism instead of submitting to an alliance with Austria and Germany. I mean, why split the Balkans with Austria when you can take it all for yourself? But for the sake of the scenario, we're going to assume that Russia sees alliance with Austria and Germany as more important than total domination of the Balkans, with only the eastern half being enough for them. So, as a result, Russia doesn't push for Yugoslav nationalism and agrees to split the Balkans with Austria. As a result, after the end of the Russo-Turkish War, Russia doesn't create a pan-Yugoslav mega-Bulgaria, but instead creates a reasonably sized normal Bulgaria, as Austria once again occupies Bosnia and Serbia gains some land in the south. And so, with their differences worked out, Russia and Austria never have to compete with each other over the Balkans again. For real this time. And though this is very unlikely, it is the only way for the League of the Three Emperors to survive. So, after the war, Austria and Russia would continue to push their influence down into the Balkans, likely waging a few more wars against the Ottoman Empire, solidifying their respective spheres of influence. And though there would still be disputes between Balkan states, most notably between Bulgaria and Serbia, under League leadership they wouldn't be able to erupt into any major conflicts. So, as a result, the Balkans don't end up becoming the powder keg of Europe that they were in our timeline. Meanwhile, back in Germany, as Wilhelm II rises to the throne, Bismarck is once again ousted. In our timeline, Wilhelm and the rest of the German diplomatic leadership decided that, since Russia and Austria's disputes in the Balkans were irreconcilable, that they should abandon Russia in favor of Austria. But this time, with them having finally worked it out, Wilhelm never feels compelled to abandon Russia as the alliance survives. But then there's Britain. As Wilhelm once again builds up the German navy and Russia pushes towards Constantinople, Britain would become greatly fearful of the League and quickly join the French, signing the Entente Cordiale with them in hopes of deterring any potential attack from the League. And so, Europe finds itself divided in two. In the east is the conservative monarchist League of the Three Emperors, and in the west is the liberal Entente Cordiale. As we move into the 20th century, Yugoslav nationalists would grow greatly irritated with Russia, a fellow Slavic state, not supporting their pushes for a Yugoslav state. And though it's still likely that Franz Ferdinand would be assassinated by Yugoslav nationalists, this wouldn't be able to erupt into a large-scale war. However, that's not to say that a war wouldn't still break out. If anything were to erupt into a large-scale war, I would say that it would probably be British and Russian competition over the Turkish Straits, particularly Constantinople. The city of Constantinople was not only an extremely strategic city at the choke point between the Mediterranean and Black Seas, but also a highly symbolic city as the former capital of the Byzantine Empire, which Russia saw itself as the rightful successor to. And then come the Turks. The Turks would be fearful of both British and Russian encroachment, but since Russian encroachment would seem far more dangerous to them, the Ottomans would probably seek British protection, joining their camp. However, with Russia not giving up on the city, war between Britain and Russia, and thus the Entente League as a whole, would inevitably break out. The war, much like the First World War of our timeline, would have numerous fronts. In particular would be the Caucasian Front, the Thracian Front, and the Western Front in France. And since the Germans wouldn't have to fight a war on two fronts, the Schlieffen Plan is never created, and Germany is able to focus their forces on the Western Front. As a result, the League is able to easily crush the Entente, as other nations, such as Italy and Greece, probably never join the war. After the war, the Russians would seize Constantinople, as well as land along the Anatolian Black Sea coast, with Germany taking lands in France, as well as seizing French colonies. And though Austria doesn't gain anything, they would be able to attempt to re-exert their influence over Italy. And so, as the League comes out victorious, the traditional, conservative, monarchical rule in Europe continues, as things such as the German and Russian revolutions never happen. But time will only tell if this will last. So I hope you enjoyed today's video. If you did, make sure to stick around for more. And hey, you could also, maybe, subscribe or something. So that's it for today's video. Well, till next time, see ya.